Welcome to Keep What You Earn, a show for entrepreneurs and business owners who want to scale and build enterprise value without making costly mistakes. I'm your host, Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CFO and CPA who left a career serving Fortune 50 companies in Wall Street to help business owners just like you make life-changing wealth with your business. These episodes are meant to be super tactical and actionable, but please remember, consult your own financial professional before you implement anything you learn in this podcast. Now, if you'd be interested in working with us to do so, check out the show notes for more information about our company, Keep What You Earn Co. All right, let's start the show. Hey, Blake, how's it going?
Shannon, great to be on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. I'm excited to have you because I feel like this is a topic that a lot of business owners don't necessarily know a lot about, and maybe don't even seek out a ton of knowledge. And I think that you're a great vehicle to share this with our audience because I've seen some of your content and it's a little bit easier to consume than I would say typical law firms are putting out there. So I would love to hear more about how did you become passionate about not only the subject of asset protection, but also teaching it to people?
Well, I think you are very much correct that your listeners are going to enjoy today's episode. Keep What You Earn. That's exactly what my law firm does. We help individuals, business owners create structures. So in the event of a lawsuit or other legal threat, they're able to still access, control, invest their money, but they don't have to worry about losing it due to any type of litigation. It's an area that's sparked my interest long before I even went to law school. I grew up in a family of attorneys and saw how much money was being taken from people due to lawsuits. I got to law school and had a professor who very much inspired me to go into the trust industry. And his only comments ever were, stay away from offshore trusts. He said this in class. I went by and saw him after class and said, why is that? And he goes, well, stay away unless these criteria are met, and then it's a good fit. So I said, all right, you keep telling the other law students, don't do this type of law. I'm going to go into it. And this has been my career now for over a decade. We now set up more offshore trusts and we've been told we set up more offshore trusts than any other law firm in the world. And we very much enjoy helping give our clients the peace of mind that what they work so hard for is not going to be taken away from them.
I love that. And what we were talking about before we hit record too was just the importance of asset protection, where sometimes you can't prevent someone from wanting to take what you own, but you can protect yourself when it happens and make sure it doesn't take a huge burden on you. And I just love that concept. But I want to start off with, for those who don't know what a trust is or does, can you give a quick little mini tutorial on what a trust fundamentally provides somebody and why it makes sense for a lot of people?
So a trust is a contract, which is just a written enforceable agreement, which involves about three different parties. One is the grantor, also known as the settlor, the one who creates the trust, and generally the one who puts the money into the trust. And then you have and then you have a second party, which is the trustee. They are going to have legal power over the assets, meaning they can decide when to give you the money back. And then you have the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the one who has beneficial ownership of the assets. So with the trustee split controlling and beneficial ownership between the trustee and the beneficiary is the one who has the right to receive distributions. This type of structure gives you the ability to separate the control from the benefit of the asset. With a self-settled asset protection trust, you have the ability to serve as both the beneficiary and the settlor. So our clients will create the trust, put their own money into it, hand the keys off to a trustee, and then the trustee will invest the money on behalf of the beneficiary, who's often and typically still the client.
Got it. So it's a way to essentially manage and protect your money that way. Who is typically the trustee? Is this, a third party that is independent? Are there any requirements for that, or could it be family or friend?
So it's not going to be a family member or friend. It's going to be a licensed trust company in one of the jurisdictions that we work in, the Cook Islands, Nevis, or Belize. And my firm goes to extensive measures to vet and review the trust companies we work with. We travel to all these jurisdictions frequently and have people that we know and trust serving at these companies.
That makes sense. And I think a lot of folks have this maybe assumption that trusts are only really readily available or made for, if you will, folks who already have built up significant wealth. because you hear about people with all these trusts and things once they have built up to a certain level of wealth. Is this accessible to basically anyone to utilize as a strategy?
So, Shannon, one of the biggest misconceptions that I come across is exactly what you said. This idea that you don't need a offshore trust unless you're worth 50 or $100 million. Most of our clients have between about $1 and $10 million in assets. These are the people who are more likely to get sued. And they're also the people who need the settlement leverage the most. If you're worth $50 million, you can pay off a $5 million judgment. Maybe a little bit annoying, but it's not going to have any real effects on your standard of living and quality of life. But if you're worth $3 million and you get hit with a $5 million judgment, that could be absolutely devastating. So what we find is that people who hire our firm have between about $1 and $2 million and maybe 10 or $20 million. We do have a handful of clients whose net worth is a little bit under $1 million. They have some concerns or they just want to be extra safe. And we do have a handful of clients whose net worth is significantly above 10 million, but it is accessible to people with low level millionaires.
That makes sense. And, you mentioned that the primary reason might be to protect yourself against lawsuits. What are some of the maybe trigger points or other things that should maybe people should start thinking about using trusts, if certain conditions are present, right? Help them understand maybe when they should start thinking about this?
So, a few different reasons that you should be concerned. One is if you're entering into a marriage or if your marriage is getting rocky. If you are growing your business and you're taking on employees, if you have children who are driving cars in your name. Also, if you are selling a business, you're about to have a big liquidation event. The new owner, and we've seen this many times before, does not manage the business as well as the individual who sold the business, and they try to undo the transaction and sue our client. You want to make sure that your money is protected from any clawbacks from a business that has been sold.
Very interesting. We meet some of those criteria too, so I'm going to be probably talking to you
Okay.
after this. My husband just went through an exit, and we're actually talking about that. So this is really timely. So I think, and even if you're not going through it now, I feel like if you are planning to, this is something to be educated on, right?
Correct. The longer in advance you have this structure, the better your results are going to be. Asset protection
Yeah.
is like fine wine.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of like we always talk about it with accounting as well, or with financial, I call it financial hygiene, is you typically don't stress out about it until the symptoms are already present. It's kind of like you don't go to the gym until the pants don't fit. And it's like you don't worry about this stuff until you might get sued. And then you go, oh, this is actually becoming a very real possibility. So I think to your point, you want to have all of this in place beforehand. It's like not waiting to get insurance until after you get robbed, right? It's
Correct.
trying to figure out how to protect yourself in advance and think about it ahead of time. Do you have any sort of stories or examples of major mistakes where people didn't set this up or maybe waited too long, where we could learn from those and maybe encourage folks to get this on their priority list?
Sure. I was speaking with the doctor for a while. He had not been sued, but one of his colleagues had been sued. It was a wake up call for him. He was dragging his feet. Before he ended up getting the trust started, he ended up getting served with divorce, a completely different lawsuit that he wasn't expecting. Had he had the trust in place to prevent any malpractice claims, he probably would have been able to settle and negotiate a better situation for his divorce. So doctors are more likely to get divorced. They have stressful jobs and they have decent assets, and having the asset protection plan in place to protect yourself, not just from professional liability, but from personal liability, could be life-saving.
Yeah. And you mentioned when you're taking on employees, which I think is very common. So I think everyone relates to that and saying, oh, I should be thinking about this when I take on employees. Why does the risk go up, or why would that be a point where I should consider it?
Employment litigation is one of the fastest growing areas of the law. It's very easy for a former disgruntled employee to exaggerate or even fabricate a claim. And what ends up happening is a defense attorney will advise their client, you can fight this, you'll probably win in court. There's a risk that you might lose bad, but you'll probably win. However, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to defend this, and it's going to take a lot of time away from what you're focusing on to defend this, and you're going to ultimately find that it makes more sense just to pay the settlement than to actually fight the case. And this becomes a situation where individuals are basically facing legal extortion. And I don't like to see this happen, and proper planning can help avoid anybody ending up in the position where they have to get taken advantage of.
Yeah, I think that a lot of folks underestimate how prevalent lawsuits actually are because they think that, I mean, we'd all like to think that everyone has each other's best interests in mind and they're going to be fair and just and all these things. But, that's why we have good contracts. Even another assumption I hear is, well, we have a great contract. We have a great contract in place that's super clear. Let's talk about that for a second in terms of asset protection or risk management is, basically a good contract won't save you from getting sued.
Well, the other line I like is I'm an upstanding business person. Even the most upstanding business person gets accused of things. Even the
Yes.
most upstanding, clean, polished individual is still going to do business with other people, of whom some of them inevitably are not going to be ethical people. Relying on the idea that you are going to avoid lawsuits simply because you operate properly is complete nonsense. In the same way that people can run very poor businesses and avoid lawsuits, you can run a very clean business and end up on the wrong end of a lawsuit. There are millions of lawsuits filed every single year in the United States, more than 10,000 filed every single day. There are billions of dollars ordered to be paid out in judgments every couple of days. We live in a highly litigious society, and a lawsuit has pretty much become a badge of success. If you're successful enough in the United States, you can expect to be sued.
I do believe that's true. Yeah. And it's unfortunately the case, but also grateful that we have lawyers who are there to protect and we have ways to go about doing that. And I think that a lot of people rest on the fact that they have, oh, like you said, I'm an upstanding business person. I have good contracts. It's like saying, I'm a great driver, but you can't prevent drunk drivers from also being on the road while you're on the road.
Right. And I say this frequently. I'm an attorney, but I say this frequently. You're not doing business with paper. You're doing business with people. And no
Mm,
matter how well written that contract is, if there's an unethical person on the other side of that paper, you've probably not gotten yourself into a good arrangement.
totally agreed. And not to scare folks into thinking that, you know, basically around every corner is a lawsuit. But if you approach business in a way where that could be the case and you just make sure you have the safeguards in place, I think that that is a healthy approach in understanding that there are risks associated with everything inherently, no matter how you behave, right?
Correct. Yes, there's risks in stepping out of your home. There's risks in running your business. I
Mhm.
don't believe in avoiding risks, but I plan on properly managing them and minimizing them when possible.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about we mentioned the trust as a strategy and what it is, generally how it's set up. You also mentioned that you went into offshore trust. Can you talk more about onshore versus offshore and just I guess the differences other than where they're located and why someone would consider offshore?
Sure. So I'll confess, early in my career, we were setting up both domestic and offshore trust. I saw how things played out when it came time to use the domestic trust, and our clients were getting much weaker settlement leverage. It was making even me worried a little bit. I just realized I'm not doing my clients a service if we're setting up structures which we know case law has shown can have the trust compromised, where clients are not getting much bargaining power. We have switched to exclusively offshore trust for the past few years. These get much stronger protection. With a U.S. trust, there's always a possibility a U.S. court could order that trust to be disregarded. We don't have that concern with an offshore trust. By law, the Cook Islands is not allowed to recognize any court orders from the United States. A plaintiff has to go to the Cook Islands, relitigate their case there, where they cannot take it on a contingency fee. They have to post a bond. There's short statute of limitations. It becomes very cumbersome to win a case in the Cook Islands, and you have to win your case there by a standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. In America, it's just 5149. You win a civil case. Cook Islands takes the U.S. criminal standard and says you have to prove your case by a standard of 99.9%. Most plaintiffs who go there don't win. It's the reason that very few even attempt to go there. It becomes a completely different playing ground when you go offshore. If you want the real protection, you go offshore. The downside, the Offshore trusts are going to cost a little bit more to set up. You also have to report your offshore trust to the IRS and FinCEN. We do provide our clients a detailed memorandum on how to complete those reporting requirements that, along with the help of the CPA, should be pretty simple to report. And in terms of the trust cost setup, the increased cost that you're going to pay for an offshore trust will be very much offset by the increased settlement leverage you get. So yes, it's going to cost a few $2,000 or $10,000 more to set up an offshore trust, but the settlement leverage you get maybe $100,000, maybe $1 million back.
Yeah. And that's one time, right? One time setup. Is there a maintenance?
So there is a maintenance. Initial setup's going to run you around 30 to 40,000. Annual maintenance is going to run you around 5 to 10,000.
Okay. Right. But the leverage associated with that far outweighs.
Correct. It's
Yeah.
unmatched protection, unmatched peace of mind.
Awesome. Hey, it's Shannon, and I wanted to remind you that the love language of podcasters is reviews. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of seconds just to leave us a review if you're enjoying this show, we would really, really appreciate it. Okay, back to the show. And you mentioned the Cook Islands. Is that the primary place where you set them up? Are there other places that, like, how did you arrive at that? Or what's the basis for which I mean, you mentioned a few of the advantages, including how they approach the litigation. Are there other countries you've considered worked with or seen that folks are setting them up in?
So I've traveled around 50 different countries, met with protectors, trustees, bankers, attorneys, CPAs all over the world. I have researched extensively the different options for creating an offshore trust. And while there's more than 24 different offshore jurisdictions which will allow for the use of an international asset protection trust, there's only 3 jurisdictions which stand out as willing to work with Americans, routinely work with Americans, and have good codified case law supported laws.
Mhm.
Those are Cook Islands, Nevis, and Belize. Of those 3, Belize is probably our least favorite just because of some instability with the government. The regulators can be a little bit unpredictable, but in some cases, a Belize trust is an appropriate solution. Nevis is a good choice as well. It is a more stable regulatory environment. However, we still prefer the Cook Islands because they've been in the business longer. They have a stronger reputation for asset protection. Their increased distance from the United States deters people from wanting to go there to litigate. So for most of our clients, we will start them off with the Cook Islands Trust whenever possible.
Okay. And I know that maybe some folks go, ooh, like offshore trust in the Cook Islands. This feels like the story of you hear about maybe I say like criminals or you hear about ultra wealthy people and it feels like this black box of like, oh, they have these offshore trusts. And I feel like there's a stigma associated with that. Like, oh, this feels a little bit weird. How do you quell people's fears about, oh, am I going to be in trouble for setting this up? Or is this not looked favorably by our government? Am I going to get in trouble for setting this up? I think there's some of that sentiment we could mostly due to the uncertainty of not knowing how it's set up, what it does, what it provides. Could you provide a little bit of comfort to our audience in terms of, you know, oh, I'm not sure about this. Is this viewed favorably by our government? And, how do I stay out of trouble for setting this up?
Hollywood has really done a good job of making international business
Yeah.
look like it is all criminal.
Yes.
I think Americans feed into that partially because, and this doesn't apply to you and me, this doesn't apply to anyone who's listening to the podcast, but Americans as a whole are very narrow-minded. Most Americans have never left the United States. Most who have left the United States have not gone beyond Canada or Mexico. But for the people who are going to be the most successful in the decades to come, they look internationally for the solutions to the problems. They say that if you were going to throw a big dinner party and you just want to throw the best dinner party, you wouldn't order everything from the local restaurant down the street. You'd order your pizza from Italy. You'd get your wine from Napa. You'd get your asset protection from the Cook Islands. You'd bank in Switzerland, and you'd really utilize the best of what the world has to offer, especially when the food down the street is poisoned. And I'm referring to the trust company down the street being easily attackable. So yes, it's something that I deal with on a daily basis. People who think, oh, is this illegal? No, it's not illegal. Attorneys have been doing this for over 40 years. Is the government going to dislike it? No, actually, a lot of people in government have these type of trusts set up for themselves. So it's legal. And the other question is this even ethical? I do not subscribe to the theory that there's anything honorable about being weak, about being unprotected, about being vulnerable, about putting your family on the line and saying, well, we're not going to do this planning because we don't think it's right. And with that, we accept the risk that our entire family's fortune could be lost. I think the most honorable thing an individual can do is get themselves as strong and protected as possible so that they can take care of the people they love and care for. And lawsuit protection is very much the basis of our entire legal system. You get sued, you hire an attorney to protect yourself from the lawsuit. You start a business, somebody's going to say, go form an LLC to protect yourself from a lawsuit. You get a few $100,000, you buy a home, people are going to say, well, create a trust to protect your children. You get to the level of $1 million, $2 million, someone says, put that into an offshore trust, and all of a sudden, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. No, that's not logical at all. It's actually the most logical step of that pattern that I just went through, because it's going to actually work and be effective.
Yeah,
And
it's
not to
almost
say
like
that the other strategies don't work sometimes, but this is definitely a more bulletproof strategy than any of the others ones I mentioned.
yeah, what comes to mind when you say that, Blake, is like when you have a certain amount of money, you can put it in the gym locker and you can put it in, something else with a padlock and then something else with a safe, and then you're putting it into a deposit box at the bank. It's a very similar progression in terms of the level of protection you need for what you have.
Correct.
And it's progressive to the point where, hey, you've hit a level now where this makes sense for you. But I think it's because it's unfamiliar. And because the only exposure people have had, to your point, is what they've heard and who they've heard using it. And they
Correct.
think, I don't want to be associated with that. But I think it's also because it's just not talked about as much. To your point about the professor, you said stay away from offshore trusts broadly, and then gave a little bit of an asterisk to that. Why was that they discouraged? And why do you think a lot of attorneys aren't specializing in this? To your point, you're a unique, you have a unique specialty here. Why do you feel like it's not being utilized by other attorneys or being preached as a great solution?
Well, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that they don't teach it in law school. So attorneys come out, and attorneys don't like the concept of asset protection, because if everybody had an offshore trust, all of a sudden plaintiff attorneys would start disappearing because they wouldn't be able to have assets they can collect. Defense attorneys would start disappearing because they wouldn't have people who needed defense. Law school demand would go down as well. And then all of these brilliant, talented attorneys we have, instead of fighting over money, might go out, find a new career where they're actually producing and giving something back to society. So it very much threatens the legal profession. And that's something that has caused a lot of attorneys to write negatively. I have know people who continue to publish articles that are misleading about offshore trust, and they like to bring up some very unusual cases which involve bad facts, bad planning, bad drafting, and they pick on these two or three cases and write about them over and over and over, to which I'm just thinking, if you talk about the average divorce and what goes on wrong and improper there, you would have millions of examples to pull from. So it's something that disrupts the legal profession, and the legal profession does not like that.
Yeah, I can understand that too. I can relate to that as an accountant too. When you look at certain elements of what is taught, it's, oh, but that doesn't make us money. And it's a kind of this conflict going
Correct.
on.
I've heard this before from other attorneys who they say, Blake, your suggestions are great. They would be very good for our client, but we're not going to bring them to our client because we don't want to touch anything offshore. To which I say, well, you're not running a law firm for the benefit of your clients. You're running a law firm for the benefit of yourself. You should run a law firm which protects your license, where you're not doing anything illegal and unethical, but running a practice and say, I'm not going to bring a suggestion to a client because we won't touch anything offshore. After I heard that, I was just thought, wow, I will never refer anyone to this attorney, because they are clearly not there for the best interest of their client.
Right. And I think it's a challenge too, because it's a question of, are they willing to invest in learning this and utilizing it? Or are they staying in their comfort zone of what makes them money and lather, rinse, repeating, what they sell to a client? It's very similar to accounting, honestly. Where are we thinking strategically about the benefit of our client, or are we just trying to churn out 1,000 tax returns, cash our check, and go home?
And it has been a challenge learning what I have learned. It has taken me years of partnering with the few other attorneys who have experience in this area. It's taken extensive travel. It's taken me reading statutes from different countries. And it's a learning curve that most attorneys are not willing to undergo. And therefore, they would just simply turn away from it, which is why I am glad to partner with other attorneys who don't have the ability to invest the time and knowledge to become a specialist in this area. I'm able to partner with them and say, hey, we can take care of your clients. We can get you paid appropriately in accordance with the bar rules. And you know the client's going to get everything done right.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that's where it comes in is being willing to also guide the folks who want to refer and not just assuming that, okay, yeah, you don't know much about this. I can come in and help your client. I can come in and supplement with my specialty and with my experience and bring that in. If you're not sure about it, if you're not able to provide this, we can, you know? And I think that specialty is key because I think a lot of people try to be a little bit of everything or know a little bit of everything and try to present as though they do and then try to help with everything and then it's but you're not especially good and haven't put that time into perfecting that particular thing and I appreciate anyone who specializes to that degree and is dedicated. So what I want to go into next though is for those listening who maybe go, okay, I see how this can protect me, I see why offshore makes sense, I'm open. How, in the case of perhaps a business situation or even a divorce, because those can apply and I think they'll be relatable, how does the trust actually work in the context of the lawsuit whereby it makes a difference, like with trust, without trust, what could happen?
So, best situation, trust is set up, bank account open, everything is properly in the trust. Next week, next month, client gets sued.
Okay.
We will tell the client to go out and hire a defense attorney to assess the case and see what the likely outcome is. Based on that assessment, we may start offering a settlement. And when opposing party does not like the settlement, then we may present to opposing party that there's an offshore trust in place. And if they push forward with the lawsuit, which is going to cost them money, whether it's a contingency fee or not, somebody, the attorney or the client's going to pay for that. A year later, you might win, you might get a judgment, but the client is uncollectible. So as opposed to taking everyone's time for the next year and you collecting nothing, why don't you take our settlement offer? Hopefully that happens. The lawsuit can progress, more information can come out, settlement discussions can go back and forth. Ultimately, our client has the bat and the ball in their trunk because their assets are protected.
Got it.
Gets to the point of the final judgment. No settlement has been reached. Plaintiff then tries to collect on it. They're then going to go to the Cook Islands. Cook Islands is going to say, well, it's been over a year since this was funded. We don't even have to hear this case. The game's over. The plaintiff can continue to hold on to their judgment, which is not worth anything. The client continues to keep their assets. The client can continue to negotiate and still offer some type of settlement so the judgment no longer hangs over the client's head, but ultimately we can keep the money protected regardless.
Excellent. Okay. And, you know, does the trust need obviously if you probably don't want to wait till after you get sued to start the trust, but does that matter in terms of it's almost like when I think about health insurance and pre-existing conditions where I go like, okay, is there a timing issue with that where if you know, at what point maybe if you don't plan ahead, you know, what are the implications and if you can actually set this up even after you've been served or before you've been served when you think there's a threat of it?
You will get the best results by doing the planning before any threat of a lawsuit.
Right.
However, if there is a pending litigation and it's not a divorce, it's not the government, we can often still set up the trust to protect from other cases that may come up in the future. So doing that may have some unintended consequences of making it a little bit harder for the current plaintiff to protect. So there's still some damage mitigation which can occur once you have a lawsuit in place, but you get the best results by planning ahead. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure, and that's certainly true in the asset protection world.
And what would you say are the first steps if someone wants to start exploring this for themselves? Maybe they're in or approaching that wealth level where this makes sense for them. What are the first steps they should do? And I mean, obviously, they say who should they call? Obviously, Blake, but how should they approach that conversation, or what should they have ready?
So contact my law firm. Myself, another attorney at my firm will get on a consultation call with you. We'll want to know about what your current assets are. You don't need to prepare anything for us. You don't need to have any documentation at the time of the call. We'll also want to know if there's any pending or threatening litigation. Once we have that information, we can give a recommendation of whether it would be appropriate to move forward with setting up an offshore trust for you. And if it is something that seems like a good fit, we'll send you all the paperwork right then that same day to get started. It takes about 30 days to get a trust established. We are working with our international counterparts to reduce that. We are going to, I believe, have the fastest ability to set up an offshore trust here sometime before the end of the year. But it usually takes about right now 30 days to get the trust established. Then it takes another 30 days to get all the assets moved in and a bank account open for the trust. So in total, expect to take about 60-day turnaround time.
Gotcha. Okay. And would a trust be set up for an individual or for a business? Could it be either? Because the business may have significant assets, but the individual maybe hasn't extracted them from the business. So if you're in that type of situation, what makes sense?
So trusts are generally set up either for an individual or for a married couple. If you have a business with a lot of cash in it, we generally recommend pulling the cash out of that business and then holding it into your personal name, because the business is going to have certain liability that you can't really divorce from the business. It's operating here in the United States. It has a storefront. It has employees. There's certain liability that just always going to be wrapped in that business. So what you want to do is run that business lean and mean, as thinly capitalized as possible, keeping as much assets outside of that business and then having those assets protected by the trust. There's other strategies that can be done. A business can be put directly into a trust. A business can set up its own Cook Islands trust. You can also do some equity stripping where you put liens and mortgages on the business and then take the proceeds and put that into an offshore account. Pretty much any asset somebody has is either already protected or something that we can protect. And that's part of our process where we talk clients through the process of tying down businesses so that they're not sought after in a lawsuit.
And as part of that conversation, I feel like a lot of it is convincing the individual, the business owner, that they have assets, because I feel like a lot of people are income focused and they don't realize that their business is an asset or the types of things that they should be protecting. Do you find that as well in terms of a mindset?
So that is something that we get asked about a lot. Hey, I don't have any assets. I've got a lot of income. The trust is more designed for protecting assets than income.
Right.
Income is a less popular asset for someone to go after because you have to wait to get paid. Most attorneys would rather just give a lump sum up front than wait months or years or decades to get paid on some type of wage garnishment. There are some strategies that can be put in place to avoid a wage garnishment. For example, if you owe someone money, they could sign in as a first creditor to you, or some type of offshore structure could be set up to attempt to avoid a wage garnishment as well. But primarily what we're doing is taking cash, stocks, bonds, real estate with equity, and placing that into the trust.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think that for a lot of folks listening, this is an enlightening conversation on, hey, I really should start thinking about this, even if you don't have millions and millions of, assets at your disposal, especially if you do. But even if you don't, this is something you should probably start thinking about, or at least planning for, that when you hit this level, this is going to be part of your strategy. Like, where should people go to find out more about working with you and your team and learning more about what you guys do?
Blake Harris Law. That's all you need to remember. All of our major social media handles, Blake Harris Law, or go to our website, blakeharrislaw.com. Fill out a contact form. You will be quickly contacted by a member of my team who will either have a consultation with you right then or schedule a consultation with you in the next couple of days. We don't charge for our consultations. Everything we do at the firm is on a flat fee. So if you do decide to engage us, you know exactly what you're going to be paying us as well. And in terms of experience, as I mentioned, we've been told by several trust companies that for the past few years, we've set up more trust with them than any other law firm in the world. We've never once lost a penny for a client.
Love that. Guys, check it out, BlakeHarrisLaw.com. Link is in the show notes. Blake, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all of this with our listeners.
It was an absolute pleasure, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
As you think about growing and scaling your business, it's important to focus on how your operating costs align with your profit and personal goals. Are you allocating your resources wisely? Are your expenses supporting growth, or are they holding you back? Building a sustainable and profitable business takes intentional budgeting and regular assessments of where your money's actually going. Now, with a power session, you can get personalized strategies to help your businesses thrive. Check out the show notes for more information on power sessions and how we can work with you to create the profit plan your business needs for a successful 2025.